Hello, everybody, and happy Wednesday whenever you're listening to this. And interestingly enough, by the way, if you're not connected with myself here on YouTube or on LinkedIn Live, today we're doing the Game Changers Experience podcast with myself, Adam Strong. If you and today we've got a live show today with someone that I'm going to be bringing on very, very shortly. So I'm super excited about that. If you guys that don't know me or haven't followed me in the past, if you're listening to me on LinkedIn or if you've connected with me on LinkedIn, then please do me a favor, hit that notifications button on LinkedIn Live and also on YouTube. Subscribe to the channel and hit that notifications button. So today I'm excited because we do a live podcast show called Game Changers Experience. If you don't know about the Game Changers Experience, please go check it out on Apple, Amazon Music, Spotify, etc., etc. And today we're on a live show, so hopefully you guys will be able to answer any questions, or if you have any, even if you want to give us a like, share, a comment, then that's super awesome too. So let's get straight into the gist of things because today's conversation is going to be absolutely awesome. I'm looking forward to it. So today's guest of today, her name is Mandeep Rai, and she is the author of the Values Compass, which is all about where she traveled to over 101 countries that taught her a little bit about purpose, life, and leadership, right? And how it relates to business. She's a global authority on values, worked with companies, institutions, and individuals from around the world. She's traveled to over 150 countries. When we first met each other, actually, she was working for the BBC as a journalist. And her book, The Values Compass, is actually an international best-selling Wall Street Journal author book, and also been quoted in the Sunday Times as well. And her book, The Values Compass, has also been quoted and endorsed by the Dalai Lama and also global visionary Deepak Chopra. Super exciting stuff. So some of the things that we're going to be covering to today's episode, ladies and gents, is we're going to be talking about a little bit about how Mandeep had got into, had Mandeep had kind of like become fascinated around learning about values and culture. And we're going to be talking about the backstory behind that. We're also going to be talking a little bit about how you guys, if you're running a business, especially for business leaders and entrepreneurs, how you can take this crucial information and learn, especially if you're growing a business. And it's so crucially important that if you learn about different cultures and their values, it could be the missing piece of the puzzle, right? So we're going to be talking a little bit about that as well. We're going to be talking about what are values, so it's interesting because I guess we all have different analogies and connotations and the definition of what values really are. And we're also going to be talking about how Mandeep is also, how she goes about observing cultures and how she formulated it down to just one particular word in value. So, drum roll, please. Without further ado, Mandeep, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
How are you?
Very well, thank you. And you?
I'm very well. I'm excited that we finally get to have some fun and get to connect, right?
Yes, I can hear the excitement, which is brilliant. I appreciate it. First thing in the morning, it's great. Where are you talking to me from?
I'm actually in Sweden at the moment, so that's where I'm at the moment. So yeah.
I am subtly, not subtly displaying two forms of the Values Compass. This is one of them, and this is the other. So this is the hardback and the paperback.
Got it. And interestingly enough, by the way, man, because I was actually looking through, because I travel between, and we mentioned, we talked about this offline, right? Cyprus and Sweden, and I was like, interesting. That's interesting. But we'll talk about.
Did you read Cyprus and Sweden? Do you see the differences?
I just
Cyprus,
wrote.
I talk about appreciation.
Appreciation, absolutely. And Sweden, you talked about. I think it was cooperation. Is that right?
Yes, cooperation.
Cooperation. Cool. All right. Well, listen. Let's get into the gist of things. For you guys that are listening to us live or replay or whatever it is, do me a favor. Use the hashtag live. Use the hashtag replay. I'm going to be excited about today's conversation. Also, if you have any questions for Mandeep as well, do us a favor, give us a like, share, or a comment on the comment section below. That will be super, super awesome. It's always good to have a live audience or just some engagement. That would be super awesome. But if not, guess what? You guys that are listening to today's recording, you can also, we'll be putting Mandeep's links, her backlinks, and some information about her book on the information below. So you can go check that out. Anyway, let's get into the gist of stuff, because what I was going to say to you, you know, interestingly, when we first came connected, which was many years ago, I think it was through a business event, wasn't it? We were talking about this the other day. It's like, how did we get connected? And then we kind of gisted it down to a business event, which was many years ago. But you know, it's interesting because, but we haven't really got to know each other until really, really recently, which is fascinating. But I find your work really very fascinating, and we share very similar networks. We rub shoulders with very, you know, similar people, which is kind of cool as well. But tell us a little bit more about what got you fascinated into values and learning about different cultures. Where did that all begin for you?
Well, I think you or anyone who's ever kind of talked to anyone from somewhere different, you always think, what is it about them? What has their history been? What's the geography that they live in? Who are the people that they're surrounded by? How is it that these, I don't know, whether it be, I'm thinking of a time when, if you've ever met an Eskimo, or if you've met someone if you're living in China and you've met someone different. I'll give you an example. There was a moment when I was walking to school, and I was the only person of color in my whole school, my whole village, the whole, like, for miles. Like, I rarely would ever see someone. In fact, I saw no one like me when I was growing up. I was brought up in a small village between Gloucester and Cheltenham. And in this little village called Churchtown, on my way to junior school one morning, which was a walking distance from my home, on my way to school, a boy tripped me up, and I fell onto the pavement as he tripped me up, and my nose broke, and there was blood everywhere. It's like I had a nosebleed and my nose broke. And when I got to school, it must have been like, I was covered. And the little boy and I get to school, and the teacher's like, "What happened? This is horrific. Like, what on earth? What occurred?" And the boy said, "Oh, I just wanted to see whether her blood was brown or red." Like, he genuinely had not seen anyone of my skin tone. And that's just one type of difference, right? I'm physically different. But I'm sure he was curious about the language we spoke at home, which is Punjabi and Hindi, about the food we ate, about how we lived, how things were colorful or different or whatever. There were so many differences. So I was like, right from the get-go, I knew that I was different, just like we all know that there are some things about us that are similar to others and some things that will be different. But what makes that difference? What is the beauty in that difference? And as children, actually, you all try and fit in. You do whatever you can so that you're not different. Why, what are the similarities? I just wanted to know what the world was like. What is the beauty in the world? Why is it the way it is? And what can we learn from one another so that we are better versions of ourselves each and every day, so that 1% of ourselves improves. And if it's just even 1%, I'm not asking us all to take on some big challenge, but even if we just thought, today I'm going to smile a little bit more, or today I'm going to just be mindful before I speak. Is this what I'm going to say helpful or harmful, even to myself, or whatever it be? And really, I think that curiosity about myself and others and the world is what led to this book. And this book, which the title is actually What 101 Countries Teach Us About Purpose, Life and Leadership. It's what each and every place, culture, part of the world, it's what we can learn from one another. It's almost wisdom from around the world distilled into into a kind of a structure that could help you. What would your life be like if you took cleanliness as a core value, the way Rwanda did after the Hutu and Tutsi genocide, and where they clearly thought they are not going to even say those words. They're going to clean up their speech. They're going to clean up the capital, Kigali. They're going to clean up the countryside. They're going to clean up their attire. Like, they wear uniforms. They're going to clean up their appearance. They're going to clean up what comes in, like how their mind, almost like flush out their minds, their psyche, their history, and their future. And you see it like today, just a few weeks back, they became, Paul Kagame is now the head of the Commonwealth. I mean, it's just been such a transformation. What would our lives be like if we just started our desk with that level of cleanliness, or you started your day with that? Often it's said that cleanliness is next to godliness. So that's just an example of one value.
I love it.
And the
Fantastic.
power of.
And you also, I also read, and you had a really big appetite for traveling when you were younger as well, weren't you?
Yes, but it didn't begin with this. I wasn't born into an abnormal family with abnormal resources or had any abnormal advantages. I remember just going on a normal school trip to France as an 11-year-old, just like my son has come back from, like we all do. Yeah, exactly. And actually, I wasn't even privileged enough to necessarily go on holiday every year or go away every year. Most of my holidays were in Britain. But I remember receiving this one opportunity when I was 19, and that was that I was given a scholarship to go and study in Melbourne at the University of Melbourne. And I thought, wow, this is my one moment. Wouldn't it be great to travel as much as I could on my way back home, like just to see as much as I could before I get caught up into the world of work, or before my parents marry me off, or before it's all over. And I really took that opportunity and made the most of that. So tried to go to across Southeast Asia on my way back. And that's, I think, when I thought, okay, there's something possible here. And then after that, whenever I could get an opportunity, for example, I took a sabbatical whilst at work. I was working for JP Morgan. And when they merged with Chase Manhattan, I took a 3-month sabbatical and thought, okay, now I want to, I've been to Southeast Asia. Wouldn't it be great to now experience a little bit of Central America? Or what would it, et cetera, et cetera. So, and also, of course, I then took on what is my ultimate job, to work for the World Service and to be able to report back from different parts of the world and different countries in the world. And that's how I've now traveled 185 countries. It's by sharing with you what is it that will transform your life or bring enlightenment or knowledge. How could the community of Ladakh, how is that their ban on plastic bags? How have they managed it? Have they managed it? What could we do in our own locality? So that's kind of what led to a lot of my work.
Love it. Great story. Fantastic. Always interesting to hear really fascinating stories. I want to kind of ask you, like, from your perspective, and just kind of to give some context to our audience members and our listeners, from your perspective, how does one define value? What is a value from your perspective? Because I think it's one of those words where I think we all have a slightly different analogy or a slightly different twist on stuff. But from your perspective, what is defined as a value?
So I keep it really simple, and it's not hugely academic or hugely complex. A value is simply what you value, what you think is important, what is number one or crucial for you. And so it could be, a value could be defined as health, or a value could be defined as excellence, or a value could be defined as forgiveness or compassion or creativity. So it's what is important to you.
But not only say we took individuals now, from my perspective, like for me, I would probably generally have, I would say that I have 5 core values,
Yes.
right? But then does it make any difference if there's just one or there's 5? Does the fundamentals and the numbers make any difference?
Yes, in the sense that if you took just one or always focused on the one core value, the likelihood is that, well, anything in extreme can, in extreme or excess, can actually have an adverse effect on your life. So, for example, even if your core value is love or service or compassion or, you know, something as noble or as great as that, in excess, it can create problems. It can have a shadow side or create a shadow. So even bright light will create a shadow, is my point. So the point of having 5 is that it gives a sense of balance. And even a stool or a chair or anything would need more than one leg to really have stability. And it's that sense of being able to be rooted in 3 to 5 different. So, for example, when your family, a good example of kind of family values might be something like family, respect, education. If all you wanted for your children was education, 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 likelihood is that you'd like turn them off almost, you know, it would be too intense, too much. So you want it balanced a little bit with fun or creativity or respect or whatever it be. And that's important for you. That's important. You need diversity, you need variety, you need balance.
So what you're saying is you generally have one main one, but for an individual, there tends to be around 3 to 5, right?
5, actually. 5
5.
is good.
Okay, cool. 5 is a good number. Good. Well, and it's a good job that I have 5 then. All right, wonderful.
And not just to have 5, but also to prioritize those, to have a number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Like if everything is equally as important, it can become difficult to make decisions because you've kind of pitted them as the same. But if you've made something as a priority, then it's easier and more helpful to make decisions.
Yeah, it's an interesting thought. I was going to say, I mean, you traveling to over 185 countries, and your book is specifically focused on the 101 that you travel to. How did you dissect it down to one particular value that, you know, that was related to that particular country? I'm fascinated to learn about that.
Well, the aim was not to stereotype a country into one value, but the aim was simply to, rather than create an academic book that talked about the value of compassion, I just took you into a country where compassion is number 1. For example, when I take you to America, I can show you a million examples where entrepreneurship is lived, breathed, how it manifests itself, how it has transformed that country. Or if I take you to Japan and show you all the ways that respect kind of is permeated into every strata of that society. Or if I take you to Madagascar and show you this kind of the way that the villages are based upon solidarity, the way they look after one another, the way they, you know, they are each other's insurance policy, given the lack of insurance policies. They are one another's kind of network and support structure.
Right.
That I was simply, the aim of the book was simply to show you how different societies, because of their history, geography, culture, background, psyche, sociology, because of all of that, are evolving into their best selves, but have evolved around a particular value a little bit more than others. And it's easier to visualize or bring it into your life when you can see how it's operated elsewhere. So, for example, Turkey. Everyone thinks they're hospitable, but the Turks really take hospitality to a whole nother level. Like I remember they will, you know, they won't let you pay for your meal. They'll leave their own bedroom and change the sheets and give you their bedroom. They just won't have a spare bedroom. It's like the main bedroom is your bedroom. They'll like, you know, they'll have a definitely try and always reserve at least a second lounge or a formal lounge or a guest lounge, or have a part of the house that is deliberately reserved for you for when the guest who is next to God comes in. Or they'll have a tray ready made with, you know, nuts and raisins and everything, waiting for that guest to come in. It's just like a whole nother level of hospitality. And you know, we can learn from that. We can learn from what it's like to make your guest feel like God, for example.
I love it. I call it the experience of wow. That's what I like to call it. When someone goes above and beyond in terms, like, to try to make you feel comfortable, and you know, it's kind of that wow experience. So, but I agree with you actually on because I mean, I've been to Turkey a number of times, and I would agree with you. We're treated like kings and queens when we go to their country. So, yeah,
we should learn from that, right?
We should definitely learn from that.
Home should feel like that. Yeah. I have a guest coming tonight. I have to up my game. I was just thinking about
it. 100%. Interestingly enough, I was going to ask you, and this is powerful information. I mean, if you're a business leader of a global organization, or even if you're running a small business looking to expand into global markets, how can we use the information that you've written about to make things a little bit easier, maybe to be a bit more effective with regards to the way that we treat people, or the way that we behave, or the way that we relate to people? How could we use that information to our advantage?
Well, I do think that although we've always had many international people within our teams, it does feel as though every Zoom call has 120 nationalities or 40 nationalities. Like we're much more global than we were even sitting in whichever multinational we were sitting in, just because all those people now come onto your screen and they're in your living room. And I mean, it's like having a piece of kryptonite or a superpower to be able to tap in to the best of someone's culture and to be able to relay it to them. And immediately you're able to build a connection or build a rapport or have an understanding of that person's background that even perhaps they haven't thought about. So this book was chosen as a guide to the Olympics in 2020 by Tokyo. And they created this beautiful Japanese version, all singing, all dancing, all in color, with not, almost much better than this, in the sense that it has maps in it. It has all kinds of pictures and facts and artifacts, etc., all in order to celebrate. I mean, it's what I do. The book has been written to celebrate each and every place and each and every person, but they just took it to a whole nother level, because they wanted every athlete, but all the supporters of every nation to feel as celebrated and as comfortable and as understood as they could. And I think that's why the book then, has won awards as the Business Book of the Year in the DEI, Diversity, Equality, Inclusion category. I think it's that sense of, in your team, if you're able to know the best of each and every person, it's like if you're able to know their strength, then how much better are they going to be appreciated, and how much better they're going to then resonate and respond to you when they feel as though you've really recognized them. So it's critical and crucial just on that level. If you just look at it from that level, and of course there are many different layers to this book. It's not just about your international team, but yet even at just that level, it's transformational.
It's interesting because we've probably had numerous conversations where your business is, say, based in the US, and you're looking to expand into, say, India or whatever it might be, and the cultures are like polar opposites, right? Same with British culture and Scandinavian culture. They're very, very different. And I see so many leaders getting it wrong, with regards to, we're going to take our same culture and our same values and take it to another country. But it simply doesn't work like that. Well, I mean, what's your take on that?
I'd say that almost what we're the successful companies and successful organizations aren't just trying to transport their national culture. They're they're being mindful of, they're getting down to their top 5 values too. For example, Levi Strauss, when it looks at what it stands for, originality, durability, creativity, then it doesn't matter what country you land in, you're able to really communicate what you stand for and seek out the talent in that country that resonates with that, the consumers and customers that resonate with that. And it has a much greater frequency because you're able to communicate it from those values. So it's not about transporting your national values. It's about transporting what you really genuinely stand for. For example, Unilever. So they stand for sustainability, not just not just in this kind of ESG or this usual way of talking about it, but no, we want to make sure that our products and services that we're thinking when we acquire a company, we're thinking about the next 7 generations that might be affected by what we're doing now. And that's a powerful way. Yeah.
I agree. I think it's a fascinating. I know we've got a couple of questions coming in, which we'll answer very shortly.
I love that. Yeah.
Which we love. But I have an interesting thought, because I know that you've lived in a lot of these countries, right? And and so you've kind of got a bit of an edge in the game. But I'd love to know more about, say you lived in a particular country, or you were there for a period of time, call it a month or whatever it might be. What are you looking for from an observation perspective? So effectively, I don't know how you do you journal? I mean, what do you look for in terms of, behaviors? Are you looking for cultures in order to define it down to that one particular value? I mean, that's a science, that's an art. I mean, that is skill, if you don't mind me saying so. But I'd love to know what the thought process and what you're doing as you go to these different countries and what you did.
Well, it's my training is that of an investigative journalist. So this doesn't come without research, book research, but also I have a PhD in the subject, but also without talking. I mean, this book is not me. This book is thousands of other voices. So it's a combination of academic research, but real lived experience. Many conversations with people who are at the top of the prime ministers and presidents, but the shoe cleaner, the person, the attendee who puts the petrol in, the person who works at the supermarket, your baker, your the school teacher, everyone and anyone. But also, as you said, observations. I mean, I can tell you key stories that fundamentally, I can sum up a country by one story because you will resonate with it. So, for example, my own country, as in I'm 3rd generation British, but I'm of Indian heritage. Yes. So my grandparents were part of this Build Britain request that Britain had of, and asked its colonies to come and help in the boundaries, etc. Yes. And they, there was this sense that I'm Indian, but yet I've never really been to India and don't really know India. And so when I went to India, I always thought I was Indian because here I'm always referred to as Indian. And when I went to India, everyone referred to me as the foreigner. And I was like, oh, wow. That's, and they knew I was foreign just from the way I moved my head. I didn't even have to speak, forget my accent, or forget the fact that I've been speaking Punjabi and Hindi since it's my mother tongue, that none of that mattered. They could just tell from the way I moved. But I remember just thinking, wow, in the rickshaw, it wasn't just Ram and Krishna, like Hindu gods that were on the windscreen. It was like Jesus was there, Prophet Muhammad was there, Buddha was there, the Sikh gurus were there. It's like every faith and religion was represented on the windscreen of the rickshaw. And it's like, may all the gods protect us as we're about to take this journey. And thank goodness, because it's a pretty terrifying journey. So it's like this sense of, it's just immediately you get the fact that there is this like vein of faith or spirituality that runs through India, and I'm just like, I live just a block away from Abbey Road Studios. Abbey Road is 30 seconds away from me, the studios are.
Nice.
And it's not surprising that the Beatles or Steve Jobs or everyone who's anyone in the Western world has taken this pilgrimage to India for that faith and spirituality. So every country has something like that, where it pulls in people because of a particular attribute or value that it does well.
Love it. Love it. Now, I want to go back to our question. Now, our question comes from Stefan Tonen. Stefan was one of our co-authors of our book last year, Play the Game. And he says, values and cultures are the most times mentioned in one sentence. Should we separate more of them or more of?
So he says, fascinating conversation, values and cultures. So we missed the first line. So what do you mean by that, Stephen? I wonder, or Stefan, should we separate more? Should we separate them more, or?
Yeah. I kind of understand where he's kind of coming from, but let's get a little bit more clarity. Stefan, if you're hearing us, we'll wait for your answer to come through, and then maybe we can get it.
Or Adam, if you understand it, you can just tell me what's the crux of the question there.
I think it's about
one sentence, but should we separate them? I think yes is the answer. We should separate them. Yes, we often summarize very quickly our values. I think that there's a time and a place. The aim of this work, or the aim of this book, is to give you a moment to reflect and do a deep dive of how you're operating, or almost the software that's operating you. And if you do that mindfully, deliberately, for a moment, and it doesn't have to take long, it can be as short as 15 minutes or as long as the 2-day retreat, it's up to you. But if you have time, if you create that time, or if we create that time to reflect on what's really driving you, and you become mindful of it, then that the time or the sentence or how quickly you then process things as they're coming to you can be much faster, because you've done the thinking in the forefront, at the get-go. But if you and that would be my answer, that you give yourself the time and space to really swim in this for a moment, so that your reactions are not just already always kind of just automatic reactions from your worldview, but that you can make a choice, that you can be considered. But it doesn't have to take time, because you've put in the work right. You put in the work when you do the process, which doesn't take long.
Yep. I think that was a good answer. If you want, if there's anything else that you want to get some clarity on, Stefan, please feel free to use the chat box, and that's really interesting. I know what I was going to ask you. Was there one particular country that you were, I suppose, not obsessed, that's not the right word to use, but I would say kind of more fascinated you, or maybe surprised you in, and create this kind of, you have this, one of your values is all about curiosity. You are curious, and you're a very curious person. I love that about you. And was there one particular, when you did all this traveling, was there one particular country that you thought, wow, this completely surprised me? Any thoughts?
So I'm glad you didn't ask the question. You kind of have tried to ask this question, but you're reframing it slightly differently. So when I'm asked, what's your favorite country? I always say, it's like trying to choose your favorite child. It's better I don't. No. And I'm not here to say, one of these countries out of the 101 is more exciting or more fascinating or anything like that. But I think you framed your question a little differently, which is to say, is the one that surprised you, or that you were keen to get to, or that made a real impression? I mean, they have all made a real impression. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to write it in the way that I did, and I wouldn't have been able to. I've deliberately presented each country is equally, and each value is equally important and equally life-changing or transformative and equally valuable. But I remember when I remember wanting to visit Cuba before Fidel Castro passed. I remember wanting to experience what that sense of communism or socialism was like when it's operating with a particular vision in mind. I remember being really blown away on how so I slipped into the Cuban society in the peso economy. I never entered the dollar economy. I never went to a hotel. I never sat at a restaurant. I was just not a tourist. I was kind of a pseudo, I speak Spanish. I can look Cuban. I just slipped into the to being someone's niece, and then was passed from family member to family member, and went and stayed with the aunt in Trinidad and the cousin, the artistic cousin, and like it was really great. And so it was really special, and it meant that I really got to see what it was like when an artist is rewarded the same monetarily, but also treated the same as the doctor or as the rubbish collector, or what it's like to have that level of, we are the same, we might have different talents and we might have different skills, but that doesn't mean one person should be at this standing in society and another person should be at this standing in society. And it was incredible. It was really I feel very privileged to have experienced Cuba when that was its DNA. And I saw how many people from around the world, like I saw how exceptional its educational system was. I saw students from everywhere coming to study medicine there. I saw how well it does. I mean, in the Olympics, it fares much better, hugely better than a tiny little Caribbean country should. It's like on a par, it's on a par with China and America in terms of medals. It's just extraordinary what it does. It's kind of résolver or resourcefulness. You might have a clapped out car, but you're able to extend its life longer when you know that you're just going to use a rubber band, and you know what I mean, like make this work. I'm not saying that cars are built on rubber bands, but you know what I mean, that you make things work because you're not there to just buy the next version, or it's not a consumerist society. At least it wasn't, and I was very lucky to have experienced that society when I did.
Very cool. Very cool. Love it. Some good stuff. And for you guys that are listening in, whether it be listening live, and you want to answer any further questions to Mandeep, you're welcome to come and say hi. Stefan says, great answer. Thanks. There we go. So thanks very much for your contributions. We love contributions and engagement. For you guys that are listening in and you have any further questions, of course, you can, we'll put, at the end of the show, we'll put the links to Mandeep so that you can reach out and connect with her. And also we'll put links to her book as well. So that's kind of cool. I know that you've had some wonderful endorsements. Deepak Chopra being one of them, of course. And I noticed that Deepak had actually interviewed you as part of, I believe it's part of his podcast. How did that relationship come about? Was it that he sought you out? Did you seek him out? I mean, obviously, he's a great guy, and how did that came about? How did that opportunity come about?
We have been, I'd say, more than friends. He's almost like an uncle to me, and we've known each other for about 15, 20 years.
Wow.
As a result of, so he studied when I was at Harvard. He was doing a lecture at Harvard Medical School, but I think it's because he also has studied there too and lectured there. So I think, but we met for the first time in New York. He has a home in New York, as well as in California, and he just lets me know. He lets me know when I remember meeting his family in Italy. He comes to London here very often, and I remember when the book finally came out. He literally said, finally. You've been talking about this for so long. I'm really glad that we have the product. And honestly, he's been one of my greatest kind of champions. He's not just endorsed me as in endorsed the book. He really has. I always think there's a distinction between a mentor and a sponsor. Mentor is someone who will give you some good advice, but a sponsor is someone who would say, look, so and so, you need to speak to Mandeep because blah blah blah. Like they'll just, they'll make the introduction, they'll make it happen. And he has been that for me. He's been exceptional. I owe him a lot, and I hope that I know that he thinks well of the book. Hence the fact that he interviewed me when he read it. He was just like, it's not just as you said it would be. It actually really builds on. Even in his own book, he has many books, over 80 books. In his latest book of abundance, he talks about values. But it's a few sentences, and he's like, thank goodness that you're really specializing in this area, because it needed that. We needed that. So I'm very, very grateful to him.
Now that I'm curious now, because he'd mentioned about time. How long did it actually take for you to actually write the book? I mean, you didn't obviously travel 101 countries over the last couple of years, unless you miraculously, jumped on one of those Star Trek transporters, I guess. But how long did it actually take you to write this book, Mandeep?
This has been a lifetime's work. I mean, the travel has literally taken my life, but much more importantly, even the writing of it has taken a decade. I'd love to say to you that I knocked it out in a year or two, but I didn't. It was there are many dead kind of cats or manuscripts in the back garden. It's iterated many times, and the last 10 years have included me reading not just my scriptures, the Sri Guru Granth Sahib Ji, and actually I'm going to be cheeky enough to even show you my scriptures, since they're right here and we're in the page. Can you see them?
Yes, I can. Fantastic. Yeah. Very cool. Yeah.
So not just my scriptures, but also the Vedas, the Buddhist texts, the Bible, the Quran. Are like all spiritual texts talk about these values. Like, for example, there's this part in the Quran which talks about the 99 attributes of Prophet Muhammad, which are essentially values, all merciful, all compassionate, equitable, etc. But it's the same in the Bible. It's not just, the Bible has, beyond the 10 commandments, it's talking, all of those parables are talking about different values. I was in a church service yesterday, and even just one value, like you could have the whole service just about forgiveness, and then breaking that down further. And but also the 10 years have included a PhD, and the 10 years have included talking to many, not just talking to, but working with many companies. So I just started to walk the walk, to start doing the work, so that this had as much integrity as I could possibly muster within that time.
Love it. Very cool. Interestingly enough, now I know that 2022 is going to be a very interesting year for most, the 21st century. From your perspective, can a value change in a particular country because of, say, war or famine, or something that may disrupt that complete value? What's your thought on that?
It's interesting that when the Russia-Ukraine conflict started, people said to me, "Oh, did you predict that, or are you a mind reader?" Because in the book I have written about, which came up before the conflict began, I've written about the fortitude, even more than strength, the kind of fortitude that Russia exemplifies and is important to Russia, and the fight for freedom that has always been the case for Ukraine. Like, it's not just now that it's been fighting for freedom, it literally has had this, it's been over many centuries that it's been trying to distinguish itself and make sure that it has the freedom that it needs to be able to express itself as Ukraine. And similarly, during the pandemic, many countries, word for word, expressed their reaction to the pandemic according to their values. So your question is, can a country's fabric or value structure completely and utterly change? I'm sure it can. If of course, if for example, Dominica, this tiny little island, when the earthquake happened, and the hurricanes, when the hurricane comes through and it was completely destroyed, like literally there weren't leaves on the trees, that kind of level of destruction and starting again, you have a moment where you can reinvent yourself or create yourself or stand for something, learn from that and stand for something different. But equally, these values haven't just been created yesterday. There's that level of research and historical kind of context that is deep rooted and comes from almost the foundation of that country, whether it's been a few hundred years like we see in North America with its recent history, or whether it's been several thousand years as we see in parts of Africa or Asia.
Love it. Very cool. Very good. So, written the book. It's taken a decade. Long time, by the way.
Sorry,
it's true. You're good. Good. I mean, I've come across many authors that actually it's been a decade. They still have got that manuscript, collecting dust on the shelf. So congratulations, anyway. You passed it. Anyway, question. I know that you've obviously, you're one of the global authorities in this now. So where do you see yourself over the next sort of 5 to 10 years in terms of like, where do you see your work kind of moving towards? What do you want your work to be known for when you're further on, maybe not even around? What's the legacy piece behind this?
Well, I know my publishers have the right to my work for 70 years after I've passed away. So when you're not even around is a good way of putting it. But I also don't like to think too far in advance because, as they say, God laughs at your plans. But I just take things a day at a time. I'm really enjoying the journey in the sense that I'm really enjoying working with countries, world leaders, companies, schools, youth groups, individuals, all kinds of, like the whole gamut. I'm really, really appreciating. This is definitely the rest of my life is definitely about values. But the way in which I come about it, I think will iterate according to what the demand is and what people need and how our world and planet changes.
Very cool. Love it. Well, listen, guys, I hope that you've been enjoying some of our conversations. And if you've been fortunate, you can also listen to the recording of this on the Game Changers Experience, of course. I was going to say to you, Mandeep, I just want to say thank you so much for being on the show today. I really appreciate you. You're
very welcome. I appreciate you too. And thank you very much for having me. Maybe see you in Cyprus or in Sweden or in Britain or somewhere one day. You never know. Soon, I hope. I'm sure that our paths will cross 100%. And I'm already envisaging that. That's really going to happen. So that's already made up to happen. So for you guys that are listening in, hope that you've enjoyed today's talk with me and Mandeep. If you want to learn more about her book, then please go check out some of the links. I believe it's available on her website, through Amazon, all of the other distributors and booksellers throughout the world. It's also available on Audible. So if you're not much of a bookworm like me, and you like to listen to the audio version, then great, fantastic. I would highly recommend it. What I also would recommend as well, if you have any further questions that you want to, please do connect with Mandeep. And I'm sure that in due time, she will obviously, her or team will get back to you as soon as possible. Just mention the podcast as we go around. So from myself and Mandeep, I just want to say we appreciate you. Thank you so much for your engagement here. And if you have any further questions, feel free to reach out. So from me and Mandeep, thanks very much, guys. And we'll see you again on the next Game Changers Experience. Take care, and we'll see you soon.